Oh, so to you all who love color, welcome back. Well, to everybody else too. But because I've got a very specific question that apparently created some confusion with video number 252, the Robert Douglas Hunter one, I decided to sort of revisit some points, bring some clarity to, if I can, to a question uh, by Jacob G. And who says, I would be interested in seeing a video dedicated to what you were talking about around the 6 minute mark here about the integration of red, yellow, and blue throughout a composition. Here is video number 252. I've heard you say this or something similar a number of times. So for all of you, if it's too much, I'm repeating too much, go find something better to do. I've heard you say this or something a number of times in relation to color schemes in design. But in this case, you seem to be relating the concept to the pigments of the palette, which I don't quite understand. I think you're saying you would prefer making, I think you're saying you would make a preference for mixing a particular pigment into your neutrals in order to pick up relationships elsewhere. So Jacob, let's look into that, but let's all go and review the video first, and we're going to challenge you, Mr. Producer. You've done this before for me. Hopefully it didn't take you an inordinate amount of time, but I'm going to play the video. Last time I made this is a restart for everybody out there. Because last time I started it, they gave me an ad 2 seconds into it, and it's really, really drove me nuts. So I think Mr. Producer told me what to do in that event, but I'm going to try it, hope for some luck here, and just hit it. Here's the question. But I do find that I prefer to make colors out of red, yellow, and blue with the idea in mind of actually having all those colors throughout the picture, and the same red, yellows, and blues, and so on. But that's his palette, and so the question is it more achievable to create neutral pictures with a limited palette? And I've never found that to be the case. And I would always refer you to Sorolla, for example, and those neutrals, the grayer notes in his pictures. They're all full of colors. I was referring to the belly of a nude by Paxton. I was trying to point out, and I can't do it online very well, but the integrated red, yellow, and blue soft integration of exactly the same value with three different colors, red, yellow, and blue, throughout the entire stomach area on this golden. I'm going to try to eliminate this thing and get back to what we're talking about here, to our regular show. So this show is called Color Integration, guys, and that's just to differentiate it from the rest, but it is about the idea of colors showing up again and again in various ways, including making the field of colors out of red, yellow, and blue. And I'll just talk about those things. The golden note that I just mentioned there on the torso by Paxton. I'll show you those images and we'll talk about them. But let me just go through this conversation one more time and just pick off a couple points here before we start. He talks about the integration of red, yellow, and blue throughout a composition. Now, in composition, obviously, we're talking about compositions needing to be a triad. It's just the picture. If I remember, the only remark from Gamma was it's cloying if you only use two colors, and I forget other kinds of reasons. But he wasn't long on reasons as much as pay attention and learn it deductively. And I like that. I like that approach. It was good for me at any rate. Made me think. But red, yellow, and blue throughout a composition, you're going to see blue things, and you're going to see them picking up in other places. I'll talk about that with Degas coming up here. But the other point I'm making is, and this may be the answer to the question that comes up a little bit later, but that is that I also said that I like to mix, but to use the same palette, the same red, yellows, and blues. I don't want a Prussian blue and 5 different kinds of blues. I don't want a 20-color palette. I found that even when I was working with Brackman as an impressionist, I found that to be really awkward, meaning to say I couldn't remember what the heck I'd used and where I'd used it, and I wasn't looking around at that time. I was so dumb. I mean, you could, but nevertheless, and by the way, it is one of those things. Sometimes you tempt yourself to want to revisit that, but progress in life tends to be, there's some stepping backward and reviewing and trying it again with new knowledge and seeing if it would work better that way. I didn't do that. I haven't gone back to 19 colors or whatever we had. But the idea of using your red, yellow, blue, your palette, in our case, 5 colors, plus black and yellow for the warm blue, shall we say, the warm green, rather. The Viridian is the warm blue. But in any case, using the same palette over and over again keeps you in a more unified state. You're mixing your colors just the way you should. You're not trying to work by a formula, but limiting your palette, I find, keeps your color, your body of colors having no surprises. You know how people say sometimes that yellow ochre is their favorite color? You go paint a yellow ochre, a solid color or something. And I did that stuff. I remember painting a cowboy, a guy with a cowboy hat who was posing for us at the Art Students League. And I remember painting local color at times. And it was the dumbest looking thing because they were right there on my palette. Well, just mix it, just stick it on there. But then but that brings us to the question of the weaving process, which means that you're not only going to use the same palette to build your colors truthfully, but you're going to try to leave them showing as colors, but not in an aggressive way, not in a way that's really involving. And as I said before, in that video piece, you were picking up that bit on Paxton, the golden belly of that Paxton nude, made out of the colors on his palette, visibly. They're all each visible. And I've seen that before. I want to tell you maybe someone like Julius Stewart or somebody, an American. I think the first time I saw it might have been them. Although the first time I ever saw anything that impressed me that way was this Sorolla, which I'll show you first. So I've heard you say this a number of times, color schemes in design. Yeah, and I'm going to show you that again. We'll go review that. But in this case, you seem to be relating the concept to the pigments of the palette, which I don't quite understand. And maybe I've explained it to you, maybe I haven't, Jacob, but just with that last comment, I think you're saying you would make a preference for mixing a particular pigment into your neutrals in order to pick up relationships elsewhere. Yeah, but not just in neutrals. I mean, I use red, yellow, and blue in every area. That incorporative mindset. So when I'm correcting a color, I say, should it be more red, yellow, more yellow, more blue? And even when I first mix the color, to put it up there, I try not to stir the color into a solid mass. I try to put it up there as unmixed. Once I see that it's happening with those couple colors, I try to put it up there that way, and then begin to add the new color, the adjustment color, red, yellow, or blue. I want to add it in a way that it doesn't bury the other colors, and many reasons for that. I guess I should address at least one of them. That if you do that and then you bury the other colors, it won't be the color that you were looking for, and before you know it, you'll have tried to make up colored bluer when you have turned it into a blue, and that's the sort of thing you have to do. You have to be wary of, or be alert for, because you want broken color. You want it to vibrate with all those other conversations, theories of color. Some of which obviously subscribe to. It's a lot of mystery in our world. But so have that in mind, that that's not just a neutrals question, okay? But it's a general color question. And so when I show you the fields by, the color fields by Monet, you'll understand that he's looking at the larger color, the great color of the field, when he's putting down the adjustment color, red, yellow, and blue, in live flecks, live blobs. And I don't think he's doing it any differently, except in his result. At the end, he leaves blot, blah, 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 that feeling of blotchiness, which I don't typically accept in textural areas. Of course, a big part of what he was painting out there was textural, the wood, the grasses, and the tree. So I think you're saying you make a preference for mixing a particular pigment into your neutrals in order to pick up relationships elsewhere. But that part's true, and that's what I was just saying, that you will pick up relationships elsewhere more readily, to the degree that you let those colors show as you put them down, okay? So if every area is invested with red, yellow, and blue, and they all on some level are able to show, and I'm not going to tell you to go in there and make a religion of this, right? But it's a worthwhile thing to do on some level, And I think you'll find most of these guys do it on some very adequate level. And so this is where I first saw, and I was a student, I think, at the Art Students League when I first saw this picture. But this is the first time I saw something, a gray that wasn't gray. My version of gray was black and white. And I even, when I early on teaching, working with Gamble, I saw this, actually, I must have seen this later on. I must have, because I was already working with Gamble. And I had this sort of a theory of let's use black and white gray, and then if it needs adjustment, we'll adjust with a color. And I think when I saw this, it was very apparent to me that he was actually, and you'll have to look at this in person, by the way. And I'm talking mostly about this area down in the lower quadrant. Let's see if my laser works today any better than that. I don't know if you guys will find that better. It probably would need to be enlarged or something. I think I'll stick with the arrows again. And but in these passages down here, you can see the grays are some green, they're all sorts of different colors. But as I recall seeing them, I recall that they weren't, what shall we say, religiously, carefully turned into red, yellow, and blue, but they were evidently not overmixed, not turned into a single gray. So you'd say, here's the foam, that's gray X. Obviously, this kind of painting wouldn't even work if we actually did that. But it also wouldn't work if we turn everything into a religion. Every spot is actually red, yellow, and blue in an overt way. You could be there for months and months. And I don't even think Monet's doing that actually. So you may want to get back to me about what I've said in previous videos and see if I've contradicted myself. But I think not. It's really too bad that the one on the right is so bright. But it's a nice example in passages like this where you can see, and in this case over here, you can easily see that he's making these things. And in this case, they really are rather neutrals, at least compared with this or some blues, other places. But this picture these are both just quite weak, but I'm hoping that you can follow through here the process that he's using. He's using color almost like Monet in these areas as he's searching out the truly nuanced shifts in the color values that are caused by the form. And but to the extent that they show, the actual color shows somewhere, it will pick up if it shows some yellow, even if it's just an admixed one. It will inherently be a woven kind of a thing. It'll be joining, shall we say, other colors. And the more you're using a single palette, and a relatively simple palette, I meant to say, the more it'll be apparent to you when a color, say like this one, is picking up over here. And even though you've mixed it, there are other colors in there with it, to the extent that there's a color of that sort there, it may, well, I don't want to force it into your mind that it will, but I think it may be a factor in creating that woven screen. It's important that these things are perceived as, in everything that we do, as searches for best practices. I want that to stay in your mind, and these are the conclusions I've come to so far. So I don't want to turn myself into some dogmatic person who's selling this stuff as much as to saying these are the things that I perceive to be happening. To the extent that you have, say, a green in this corner and this corner, if that note shows up in through here, it inevitably, if you can back yourself up mentally, it inevitably will create more unity in any other place that it shows in even some version of that. And I don't, so I'm saying that, let's say passages up like this, there is an inherent, if you can see it, if you have eyes to see it, there's an inherent connectivity right there, just by having that element of green in this otherwise skin-colored, shall we say, golden body or whatever color that is. Yeah. Anyway, but you can see all these magnificent transitions. See how warm that red this is over here, cool this is over here. And their movements up and down from cool into red, cool into red, and over here from cool into what now looks like, when you're looking at this red, now it looks much more golden, more orangey, more yellow, in other words. Yeah, I've probably said enough on these. I don't want to overextend this one. But you see the same thing in the blue cup, which I didn't bring with us today, but which we look at a lot. But you can see these wonderful color pieces out here where you can see a warm tendency here. That warm tendency, whatever it is, in his search for the color that's in the background. And he does seem to have had buildings across from him that affected in the blue cut in particular, you can really see the movement down the wall is going from blue to red, or rather from, blue to red in an upward direction, suggesting a brick wall flashing up into the model's face. And not then being cooler down low. I'm thinking of it as I've observed it by memory. Again, so though here you are seeing these woven colors all through these entire areas, and to the extent they actually show as colors. Now we know, and generally I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the golden qualities or greenish qualities here that might then pick up that. So that doesn't require this to be anything more than the general color that it is. But that's the question. Do I get more mileage out of it to the degree that those spots actually show as such, right? So, yeah. And I know that's what you're looking to understand in me saying. So that is the kind of direction I'm talking about. The way, if you're talking about, say, the color here, well, I don't even know where to pick on it, but if you take in with big eyes, you'll see this color picking up in other places again, in different places. Now, it could be just simply the larger field of that note, but as I said, to the extent that you put down a note and leave it and don't overmix these things, my theory at least is that you will get more benefit, impressionist benefit, but I'd call it now in this case decorative benefit, like the weaving of rugs, carpets that Degas talks about. Degas is so much, Monet is so much more self-evidently woven, right? Doesn't it just feel like every spot is is sort of everywhere? And that is the very nature of a picture that's aware, and that where the painter is aware every minute he's making a mark of whether it should be more red, yellow, or blue, and also to the extent that he's characterizing these things with live color. The relative chromaticity, as I said, if you stir it to death, you'll lose all that. But the relative chromaticity of this and all these blue relationships, whatever version of them you see out there, whatever these blue elements, they begin to pick up the more they say their name, right? And then certain parts like that, maybe this will pick up like literally. And again, that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. It can be happening in that one way, but in the way you're asking it, it really is more about when you see the sky over here turning pink, to the extent that you actually don't just make it a sky that it stays blue and sort of gets pinkish, but to the extent you leave these notes live, that's your question, and I'll leave it probably best as a question. Does that, in fact, enhance the unity of the picture? The more you can see this here, do you see it in here and wherever, and does it keep happening again and again? And that's again back to the Paxton idea. If you have that note in your brush, look around to see where else you might put it. You don't put it there to bury it, right? An impressionist puts it there to be seen, right? Now I'll leave this one on the right. This is such a rich picture. This is again that mentality of atmospheric. It gives you the feeling that you're in that day, in those shadows, in that atmosphere. Not meaning atmospheric in the sense of aerial perspective or the thing that Hale was going on about in his book. If you haven't read that, all of you ought to read it, the Vermeer book by Hale. But again, the woven, the connectivity, you can see all the reds up and through here. If they don't show their color, they won't pick up these reds. So the more this is local color, I think the less you find that you'll have the weaving capacity that gives it its decorative unity. Okay? Maybe that's the best place to leave that, except I'm going to put you down here with a truly decorative painter. Degas, I think it was Degas who said he was a decorator out of a job. Liz, correct me if that was Bob who said that about himself, because for some reason I have a mental block about who actually said that. That's Bob's wife that I'm talking to. Assuming you're watching this, that would be a lot of fun to get feedback from you. Nevertheless, this is, so what you're seeing here is the broken color model. Just searching for the color of this haystack, the color of the sky, and the sky moving from yellow to blue, and whatever is happening, the color travel in through here. Of course, my argument is that these are very live notes, and to the extent that they're live, fresh notes that aren't overmixed, to get the generalization. You see what I mean? You're putting out live notes, but you're incorporating them, including to make a gray. They don't have to be that live. If you're in a gray world, I'm not suggesting you should put down brilliant colors. But in the rich family, this is a relatively neutral thing here, right? Compared to, say, some spots over here. These are much richer. This is a somewhat rich spot, and so are parts of this, but you could call this a relatively neutral note. But you can see it's built out of all those colors, numbers of which show up again and again through the picture. And what I'm going to point you to now is Degas on the left, where you can see him actually using this in a practical way. You can see the whole grassy field is red, yellow, and blue in marks, like an Impressionist. And this is the guy that told you not to go out there. He wanted to shoot people if they were out there. If he was a property owner, he would get out there with this guy and be able to defend himself for doing that. But what you do see is that green is picking up these guys. The reds in it is picking up the horse reds, maybe. But in all cases, the pinks are picking up the pinks all through here as they're woven. And I think in a different iteration of this, you might see this, but this is a decorative version, a purely, actually, I hate to say it that way, but I'm going to have to, a purely artistic handling of color for the purpose of the decorative, for the purpose of making a beautiful color field, okay? I do like that he talked about weaving as in weaving carpets, woven carpets. He's get a color scheme from looking at carpets, but it looks like he might have gotten more from looking at carpets, including the idea that in the carpet, woven carpet, you'll find that particular color showing up again and again and multiple times in places. So you can see the horse's colors show up. I'm talking about that browner kind of red. These violety kinds of things are showing up, of course, obviously. And the greens, the turquoises, the other greens, the blues, they're all showing up again through this field out here. Now that's decorative color work based on Impressionist searches that are done with live color marks. And to whatever extent the value is right, but those kinds of color marks you're looking for side by side and not stirred in. So you can see it's not a realism model in one sense at all, but that's the use, and that's what Degas did. He took Impressionist lessons in color, even though he calls himself an Impressionist in line. He was, in another sense, much more than that. But he wasn't sitting out there painting this from life. Somebody asked me what I think of plein air, and I thought that was an interesting question. I can answer you now that I get a big kick out of doing it, and I don't condemn it in the way Degas did because I love the Impressionist search, and the model is good indoors, outdoors. What's wrong with the model? Monet proves, at least in the significant body of his work, that it's a totally viable field to mine. So this last one, I'm showing you the same horse and then the Degas bather. And again, here's a figure where you could say virtually everything on it is neutrals, right? But you can see that he's woven over here. He's taken several different colors. And he's like the lighter yellow is rather showing up in aspects of the figure. And by the way, pastel is a beautiful medium for doing this. This chunk, chunk, chunk. You virtually have to do that. You can always stick your thumb in it and muddy it up and dull it down. I've taken several approaches to that, by the way, breaking it all up, getting this kind of a field, and then trying to bring it to a more and then brushing it all together and turning it into a rather smoother painting, and then coming back at it with this broken color stuff again in a controlled way. But I've been all over the place with that. I can't tell you what I think is best. I do different things. I think pastel is a wonderful medium for the purposes of searching around stuff. But now you take any of the colors you see out there, and you'll see them picking up again. But I just wanted to show you like the field. You see the reds. This is a field of the bluish darks, some sort of dead pale yellows, and some reds, and even some purpley colors. But they're all the same colors that you're basically seeing out here, or a significant number of them. So that's the idea of the woven in that I was talking about. So I hope this covers all the three aspects of color integration that I talk about. I think I'm running out of ideas here. I can't think of something else I say. If I have said something else and should have addressed it, let me know. But the broken, you could take any area like the back is full of the blue and the red. And by the way, reflected lights being what they are, it's a gift, isn't it? But does that mean the guy sat here and threw the golden thing down and had it bounce on the model? He implies that it's not what he does, and I don't know the answer to that. But he does bring models in, and so it's within. If it wouldn't surprise me if he did, but it doesn't look studied in that way. You see what I mean? It looks more like he's interested in using this as a it's a logical thing. Oh, if I'm having a golden color here, that I would distribute it everywhere. So the gold shows up here, gold, whatever that is, shows up maybe in here, maybe here. But in areas like this, maybe he's showing the gold and the red and the whatever, these combinations. And that's but there again, you see, look at the blue up in these oranges up here. So he makes the wallpapers. He must have thought that was a marvelous gift to put carpets on the walls. Wallpaper. So wallpaper blue is showing up and really making up a fun game. And if you'll back up mentally, you can begin to enjoy the way that plays. Those kinds of games that he plays with the distribution. And as I said, in the distribution, you can have the golden stuff in here being picked up by stuff here, or being just simply elements that relate to aspects of the golds on the body. But at the same time, that same body is serving to respond to the blues. It's a phenomenally interesting idea. He's such a painter's thinker. This is really, really getting at the heart of what makes you look and look and look at paintings, right? I do find stories, I have to admit, and I'll end with this, but I do find stories tiring, exhausting, and never compelling. No matter how much they are, I can't look at them as long as I can come back to a piece like this Degas or that Benson, where they haven't committed us to realism, and this could have happened. You know what I mean? And like a little, 5-year-old saying, "Dad, did that really happen? Did that really happen?" But rather giving us a plausible phenomena, story phenomena to hang our hat on, a narrative, and then taking us for a ride, the ride of our lives, through the red, yellow, and blue. Oh, look at this! I'm looking at these myself, and look at the yellows, then, and distributing all through here, all these yellows, into the arm, down into here, and then back over here. Oh man, what a joy! What a pleasure this is. Anyway, but yeah, in Degas, as Degas said, he's always interesting. But I think you'll find he's a guy you can look at and look at and look at. What did Oscar Wilde say? You can tell it's a good picture if you have to go back and take another look. So, all right. Hey, mercy, it's only been a half hour. All right, I didn't think that would be too long. So, Mr. Producer, I do, I do want to thank you for your indulgence. You've successfully done this before. I hope you can do it this time. You'll be on my case if you can't. All right. Again, thank you all for your donations, for your sharing, and your wonderful comments, sweet attitudes, and I really liked all those thoughtful ones too, including the one. Sorry, I'm forgetting your name. Maybe it was Tattoo, but you came back at me about the moderns. Yeah, as I said, I don't really want to deal with those guys, but I do appreciate the conversation. I appreciate that people bring stuff back to me, and I will go back into it if I perceive that there's a sort of a, shall we say, a great conversation there. And I don't mean to say yours didn't, or I wouldn't have brought up the other, that I wouldn't have introduced the other stuff. But yeah, that's enough of that. All right. Get back to me again if I didn't get it. All right. All of you take care. See you. Have a good painting week. I'll see you next time. Okay.